Welcome to HOA Violation Vault. I thought retirement meant quiet. You cannot block a community meeting. I live here. I pay dues. I have every right to ask questions about this sale. Kimberly Stewart stepped between me and the community center entrance, her blaze orange blazer practically glowing in the Dallas morning sun, and jabbed her finger at the notice taped to the door. "Read the standards," she said. "Special session. Board only. You show up, we call the police for trespassing." I am holding a printed agenda that lists the sale of Lot 14, the vacant quarter-acre parcel at the end of Maple Court, for $60,000 to a buyer identified only as private purchaser. The county appraisal district values that lot at $110,000. I found survey stakes driven into the grass yesterday morning when I left for work at 5:30. I work in finance. Early mornings are normal. Seeing stakes on HOA property with an attorney copied on the sale notice is not normal. The Oak Hills Community Association has owned that lot since the developer donated it in 2012. It is supposed to be a community green space. Now the board is selling it at a 45% discount with 48 hours notice, and Kimberly is telling me I cannot even attend the meeting. I moved to Oak Hills 2 years ago because I wanted a stable mortgage and predictable bills, and I thought the standards would protect me. The neighborhood is clean, the streets are quiet, the dues are reasonable. What I did not expect was a board that treats association assets like their own property. Kimberly Stewart is the head of compliance. She brags about citations. She carries a black leather binder of standards with color-coded sticky tabs everywhere she goes. She talks about community interest while the board enriches itself. I rented in Dallas for 6 years before I bought this house. I thought ownership meant stability. Instead, I am standing in a parking lot at 7 in the morning arguing with a woman who just told me I will be fined if I try to enter a meeting about selling property I help pay to maintain. Kimberly pulled her phone up and started recording. "You are harassing a board officer. That is a violation. I am documenting this. I did not move." I said, "The agenda does not say executive session. It says special session. Those are different." She smiled. It was the smile of someone who has heard every argument and won every time. "Read the standards," she said again. Section 12, subsection 4. Special sessions may be closed at the board's discretion. We voted. It is closed. You are not welcome. Now leave or I call the sheriff. I wanted to argue. I wanted to pull out my own phone and record her, but I also wanted to keep my access to records and my standing to fight this. So I stepped back. I said, "Fine, I will see you at the next open meeting." She lowered her phone. "Good, and pay your late fee. You are 3 days past due on your quarterly dues." I stared at her. "I paid online 2 weeks ago. I have the confirmation email." She shrugged. "Our system shows unpaid. Pay it or we escalate. You cannot fight the HOA." Then she turned and walked into the community center, her binder tucked under one arm, her phone still glowing in her other hand. I drove home and pulled every email I had from the HOA. I found the payment confirmation. I found the annual budget. I found the notice about the special session, sent at 9 p.m. the night before, exactly 48 hours before the meeting. I did not find any mention of Lot 14 being for sale. I did not find any discussion of selling community assets. I did not find any appraisal or market analysis. What I did find was a sentence in the association bylaws that said any sale of HOA property requires a majority vote of the full board at a properly noticed meeting. Special sessions are allowed for emergencies. A land sale is not an emergency. I called the management company. A woman answered and said, "Oak Hills, how can I help you?" I said, "I need copies of the appraisal and the purchase agreement for Lot 14. She paused. Then she said, "I cannot release those without board approval." I said, "I am a homeowner. Those are association records." The Texas Property Code says I have a right to inspect financial records. She said, "You need to submit a written request." I said, "Fine. I am submitting it now. What is your email?" She gave me an address. I sent the request while I was still on the phone. She said, "We will respond within 10 business days." I said, "The meeting is in 47 hours. She said, "That is not my problem," and hung up. I spent the rest of the morning digging through county records online. The Dallas County Appraisal District website showed Lot 14, legal description Block 7 Lot 14, Oak Hills Section 2, owned by Oak Hills Community Association Incorporated. Appraised value $112,000. No recent sales. No liens. No pending transactions. I pulled the plat map. Lot 14 is a rectangular quarter-acre parcel between two occupied homes. It backs up to a drainage easement. There is no access from the street except through the drainage right-of-way. It is landlocked unless the buyer also owns one of the adjacent houses. I looked up the adjacent properties. The house to the west, Lot 13, is owned by Richard and Susan Morris. The house to the east, Lot 15, is owned by Thomas Carver. I pulled the voter registration records. Thomas Carver is registered at that address. I pulled the Oak Hills board roster from the last annual meeting packet. Thomas Carver, treasurer, elected 2023. Term expires 2026. The treasurer is buying the vacant lot next door to his house at a 45% discount from the association he controls. That is the deal. That is what Kimberly is protecting. I took a screenshot of the appraisal district page. I took a screenshot of the board roster. I took a screenshot of the plat map showing Carver's house adjacent to Lot 14. Then I opened the neighborhood Facebook group and posted, "Does anyone know why the HOA is selling Lot 14 to a board member for $60,000 when it is appraised at $112,000? Meeting is tomorrow at 6 p.m. I attached the screenshots. Within 10 minutes, I had 15 comments. Half of them said they had no idea the lot was being sold. A quarter said it was none of my business and I should trust the board. The rest said they wanted answers. One comment stood out. It was from a contractor named Miguel Torres who had done work in the neighborhood. He said, "I bid on a project to clear that lot last year. The board told me it was going to be a dog park. Now they are selling it? That smells bad." I messaged him privately. I said, "Are you willing to go on record about that bid?" He said, "Absolutely. They wasted my time. I will testify if you need it." The Facebook post exploded. By noon, I had 40 comments and 12 private messages. 3 people said they were coming to the meeting no matter what Kimberly said. 2 people said they were calling the management company. 1 person said I was causing trouble and should be fined. That person was Susan Morris, wife of the owner of Lot 13. I checked the board roster again. Susan Morris, secretary, elected 2024. Term expires 2027. The secretary lives on one side of Lot 14. The treasurer lives on the other side. The treasurer is buying the lot. The secretary is defending the sale. I posted a follow-up comment. I said, "Interesting that the only board members defending this sale are the ones who live next to the lot being sold." The comment got 23 likes in 5 minutes. At 1 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "This is Kimberly Stewart. You are spreading false information. The sale is legal and proper. You are creating a hostile environment. If you continue, the board will pursue legal action for defamation and harassment." Attached was a PDF. It was a violation notice. It listed 3 infractions: disrupting board operations, harassing board officers, spreading misinformation. Total fine, $300. Due in 10 days or the HOA would file a lien. I took a screenshot of the text and the violation notice. I posted it to the Facebook group with the caption, "This is what happens when you ask questions." The post got 54 comments in an hour. The management company called me at 2:15 p.m. The same woman from the morning said, You need to take down your Facebook posts. You are violating the community standards by disparaging the board. I said, I am stating facts, public records. She said, you are creating a disturbance. The board has authorized me to inform you that your access to common areas will be suspended if you do not comply. I said, you cannot ban me from common areas for posting public information. She said, read the standards, and hung up. That afternoon, I drove to the vacant lot. The survey stakes were still there. I counted 8 of them, marking the corners and midpoints of the property line. I took photos. I took a short video, panning from the stakes to the 2 adjacent houses, narrating the addresses and the owners. I said, Lot 13, owned by Richard and Susan Morris. Susan Morris is the HOA secretary. Lot 15, owned by Thomas Carver. Thomas Carver is the HOA treasurer and the buyer of this lot for $60,000, 45% below appraised value. Today is March 14th, 2025, 2:12 p.m. The board meeting is tomorrow at 6 p.m. I uploaded the video to my laptop and saved 3 copies. 1 on my hard drive, 1 on a thumb drive, 1 in cloud storage. Then I sent a copy to Miguel Torres with a message. I said, if anything happens to me or my access to the meeting, you have this. He replied, got it. I also sent a copy to a lawyer I know who does real estate work. I said, I might need you tomorrow night. She replied, I charge $300 an hour, but I will watch the video now for free. Call me if it gets ugly. At 4 p.m. I got an email from the management company. It said my records request was denied because the documents I requested were part of pending litigation and protected by attorney-client privilege. There was no litigation. There was no lawsuit. It was a lie. I replied and said, what litigation? Case number, please. No response. At 5 p.m. I got a call from a board member I had never met. He identified himself as Jonathan Lee, board member at large. He said, I saw your posts. I did not know about this sale until yesterday. I was not consulted. I do not think this is right. I said, are you going to vote against it? He said, I do not know if I can. Kimberly and Thomas are saying it is already approved. They are saying tomorrow is just a formality to record the vote. I said, that is not legal. The bylaws require a vote at a noticed meeting. He said, I know. But I am 1 vote. There are 5 board members. Kimberly, Thomas, Susan, and 2 others. I do not think I can stop it. I said, you can if you show up and demand a recorded vote. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I will try. I did not sleep much that night. I kept thinking about Kimberly's smile, about the management company hanging up, about the violation notice, about the phrase you cannot fight the HOA. I thought about selling my house and leaving. I thought about paying the fine and staying quiet. But I also thought about Thomas Carver buying a $100,000 lot for $60,000 and the rest of us paying dues to maintain it while he profits. That thought made me angry enough to stay awake. The next morning I got another text from the unknown number. It said, the meeting time has changed. New time is 4 p.m. Location is the management office conference room. Attendance is restricted to board members only. I checked the original notice. It said 6 p.m. at the community center. I took a screenshot of both messages. I posted them to Facebook. I said, they are trying to move the meeting and hide it. Original notice said 6 p.m. community center. Now they are saying 4 p.m. at the management office and no residents allowed. This is not legal. The post got 30 comments in 10 minutes. 6 people said they were going to the community center at 6 anyway. Miguel Torres commented and said he would be there. Jonathan Lee sent me a private message. He said, I just found out about the time change. I was not told. This is wrong. I am going to the community center at 6, and I am demanding a vote. At 3 p.m., I drove to the management office. It is in a strip mall 2 miles from the neighborhood, between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The office door was locked. A handwritten sign taped to the glass said, "Closed for private meeting." I knocked. No answer. I called the management company number. No answer. I waited in my car. At 3:45, a silver SUV pulled into the parking lot. Thomas Carver got out. He is a tall man, mid-50s, thinning hair, polo shirt, and khakis. He saw me and stopped. He said, "You cannot be here." I said, "The original notice said 6 p.m. at the community center." He said, "The notice was amended." I said, "When?" He said, "Yesterday." I said, "I got the amended notice this morning. That is not proper notice." He said, "Take it up with the board," and walked to the door. He unlocked it and went inside. 2 minutes later, Kimberly arrived. Blaze orange blazer, black binder, phone in hand. She saw me and shook her head. She did not say anything. She just walked past me into the office. Susan Morris arrived next. Then a man I did not recognize. Then the management company woman. At 4 p.m. the door closed. I sat in my car and waited. I could not see inside. The blinds were drawn. At 4:30 I drove to the community center. It was empty. I parked and waited. At 5:45 Miguel Torres pulled up in a pickup truck with his company name on the side. He walked over. He said, "Are they really trying to do this in secret?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That is insane." I said, "Welcome to Oak Hills." At 5:50 Jonathan Lee arrived. He looked nervous. He said, "I called Thomas. He told me the meeting already happened. He said they voted and it passed 4-1. I was the one no vote." I said, "You were not even there." He said, "I know." He said I was recorded as present by proxy. I never gave anyone my proxy. At 6 p.m. about 20 residents showed up. Some I recognized from Facebook. Some I had never seen. They all wanted to know what was happening. I explained the lot sale, the appraisal value, the board member buyer, the secret meeting. One woman said, "Can they do that?" I said, "No, not legally." Another man said, "So what do we do?" I said, "We go to the management office and demand to be heard." We drove in a convoy to the strip mall. 8 cars. 23 people. We parked and walked to the management office door. It was still locked. The closed sign was still up. I knocked. The management company woman opened the door a crack. She said, "We are closed." I said, "You are holding a board meeting. That is a community meeting. We have a right to attend." She said, "The meeting is over." I said, "The notice said 6 p.m. She said, "The notice was amended." I said, "We did not receive proper notice of the amendment." She started to close the door. Miguel put his hand on it. He said, "You are not closing this door until we get answers." She said, "I am calling the police," and pulled out her phone. I said, "Call them. We are not trespassing. We are here for a publicly noticed meeting." She hesitated. Then she said, "Wait here," and closed the door. We waited. 2 minutes later, the door opened again. This time it was Kimberly. She stepped outside. She said, "The meeting is over. The vote is recorded. The sale is approved. You can read the minutes at the next regular meeting in 30 days. I said, "You changed the meeting time with less than 24 hours notice. That violates the Texas Property Code open meetings requirements for HOAs. She said, "Read the standards. Special sessions are exempt." I said, "Show me where it says that." She opened her binder. She flipped through pages. She landed on Section 12, Subsection 4. She read out loud. Special sessions may be closed at the board's discretion for matters involving legal consultation, personnel issues, or contract negotiations. I said, "This is a land sale, not a contract negotiation." She said, The sale contract is a contract. Therefore, it is a negotiation. I said, that is a stretch, and you know it. She said, the board attorney agrees with me. I said, let me talk to the attorney. She smiled. She said, he is on the phone inside. Would you like to come in? I said yes. She said, you and one other person. The rest wait here. I looked at Miguel. He nodded. We followed her inside. The conference room was small, a table with 6 chairs. Thomas Carver sat at the head. Susan Morris sat to his right. The man I did not recognize sat to his left. Jonathan Lee was not there. A speakerphone sat in the center of the table. A voice came through. It said, "This is James Patterson, HOA legal counsel. I understand there are residents with questions." I said yes. I want to know why the board sold community property to a board member at below market value without proper notice or competitive bidding. Patterson said, the board has the authority to sell HOA assets as it sees fit, provided a majority votes in favor. The vote was 4-1. The sale is valid. I said, Jonathan Lee was not present. How did he vote? Thomas said he submitted his vote by proxy. I said, he told me he never gave a proxy. Thomas said, it is in the records. I said, show me. Thomas looked at Kimberly. Kimberly said, the records are confidential until the minutes are approved. I said that is not true. Homeowners have a right to inspect records. Patterson's voice cut in. He said, you are disrupting a board meeting. If you do not leave, the board will pursue a restraining order. Miguel spoke for the first time. He said, I was hired last year to bid on clearing that lot for a dog park. You told me it was an association project. Now you are selling it. That sounds like fraud. Patterson said, who are you? Miguel said, Miguel Torres, contractor, and I am willing to testify in court that the board misrepresented its intentions for that lot. Patterson was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he said, the dog park project was considered and rejected. The board has the right to change its plans. Miguel said, you did not reject it. You lied to me to get a free estimate. Then you sold the lot to your treasurer. That is self-dealing. Thomas stood up. He said, this meeting is over. You need to leave. I said, not until I see the vote record. Kimberly stood up. She said, you are trespassing. I am calling the sheriff. I said, you invited me in. She said, and now I am uninviting you. I pulled out my phone. I said, that is fine. I will just send this email to the entire board and the county clerk. Patterson said, what email? I opened my phone. I pulled up the email I had been holding. I said, I have an email from the management company dated March 10th, 5 days ago, asking the county appraisal district for a property valuation on lot 14 for potential sale. The email includes the phrase, buyer confidential per board president request. Your board president is Kimberly Stewart. You started planning this sale before you ever noticed a meeting. You never intended to let homeowners have input. The room went silent. Thomas sat back down. Kimberly closed her binder. Patterson said, how did you get that email? I said, public records request to the county. It is a government email. It is public. Patterson said, that does not prove anything. I said, it proves you planned this in secret. It proves you knew the appraised value and you still sold it for $60,000. It proves you violated your fiduciary duty to the homeowners. Patterson said, I need to consult with my clients. Please step outside. Miguel and I walked out. The other residents were still waiting in the parking lot. I told them what happened. I told them about the email. I told them about the proxy vote that Jonathan Lee never authorized. One woman said, what happens now? I said, we wait. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button, and subscribe for more HOA drama. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Kimberly came out. She said, "The board has agreed to table the vote pending further review. The sale will not proceed at this time." I said, "And the fine?" She said, "What fine?" I said, "The $300 violation notice you sent me." She said, "That will be reviewed." I said, "I want it canceled in writing." She said, "Fine, you will receive a letter." I said, "Tonight." She said, "Within 3 business days." I said, "No. Tonight. Or I file a complaint with the county and the Texas Attorney General for HOA fraud and self-dealing." She stared at me. Then she said, "You will have it tonight," and went back inside. Miguel clapped me on the shoulder. He said, "You just made them blink." I said, "Barely. They will try again." He said, "Maybe. But now people are watching. That matters." The other residents started asking questions. I spent 20 minutes explaining what I knew and what I had found. I gave them copies of the screenshots. I told them to file their own records requests. I told them to come to the next open meeting. I told them to vote in the next board election. At 8 p.m., I got an email from the management company. It said the violation notice was rescinded. It said the fine was canceled. It said the board would revisit the lot sale at a future meeting with proper notice and public input. It did not apologize. It did not admit wrongdoing. But it was in writing, and it was signed by Kimberly Stewart, compliance officer. I forwarded the email to Miguel, to Jonathan Lee, to my lawyer friend, and to everyone who had shown up that night. Then I sat in my car and watched the strip mall lights turn off one by one. The next morning, I woke up to 17 text messages. Most were from neighbors thanking me. 2 were from people calling me a troublemaker. 1 was from Jonathan Lee. It said, "I resigned from the board this morning. I cannot be part of this. Thank you for standing up." I replied, "Thank you for being honest." Another message was from Miguel. It said, "I talked to 3 other contractors. They all got the same dog park story last year. We are writing statements. Let me know if you need them." I spent the morning documenting everything. I made a timeline. March 10th, management company requests appraisal. March 12th, survey stakes appear. March 13th, sale notice posted. March 14th, meeting time changed. March 15th, secret meeting, confrontation, email revelation, sale tabled. I saved every email, every screenshot, every text message. I printed copies and put them in a binder. Not a black leather binder with sticky tabs, just a plain 3-ring binder from the office supply store. But it felt good to have the records organized. That afternoon, I got a call from a reporter at the Dallas Observer. She said, "I saw your Facebook posts. I am working on a story about HOA corruption in North Texas. Can I interview you?" I said yes. We talked for 40 minutes. I sent her copies of the documents. She said the story would run the following week. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from the HOA attorney. It said the board had reviewed the lot sale and determined that the process had been flawed. The sale to Thomas Carver was canceled. The lot would remain HOA property pending a community survey about future use. The letter also said the board would refund any fees or fines assessed to residents in connection with the dispute. I got a check for $300 in the mail 3 days later. The Dallas Observer story ran on March 23rd. The headline was HOA board tried to sell community lot to treasurer at discount. Residents stopped it. The story included interviews with me, Miguel, Jonathan Lee, and 4 other residents. It included the county records, the email, the timeline. Kimberly Stewart declined to comment. Thomas Carver declined to comment. The management company issued a statement saying they follow all applicable laws and bylaws. The story got picked up by 2 local TV stations. A reporter showed up at my house and asked for an on-camera interview. I said yes. The segment aired that night. It was 3 minutes long. It showed the vacant lot, the survey stakes, my binder of records, and a clip of me saying, "Homeowners have rights. HOAs are not kingdoms. Boards have to follow the law." The Facebook group exploded. The post about the news segment got 214 comments. People were angry. People were supportive. People were calling for a recall election. People were saying I should run for the board. I had no interest in running for the board. I just wanted to live in my house without being extorted. 3 weeks later, the HOA held its next regular meeting. It was packed. 47 residents showed up. The meeting room only had 30 chairs. People stood along the walls. Kimberly ran the meeting. She looked exhausted. Thomas Carver was not there. Susan Morris was not there. The agenda included a discussion of the vacant lot. Kimberly said the board was forming a committee to gather community input on the future use of Lot 14. She said the committee would be open to all residents. She said the committee would report back in 90 days. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She just read from a script and moved to the next agenda item. During the open comment period, 12 residents spoke. Most of them thanked me by name. One woman said the board had lost her trust, and she would be voting for new leadership in the next election. One man said the HOA needed independent audits of all finances. Miguel spoke. He said, "I have been working in this neighborhood for 8 years. I have seen boards come and go. This is the first time I have seen residents stand up and win. Keep fighting. Do not let them forget you are watching." When the meeting ended, Kimberly walked up to me. She did not have her binder. She looked smaller without it. She said, "You cost me a lot of trouble." I said, "You cost yourself trouble. You tried to cheat the homeowners." She said, "We were doing what we thought was best for the association." I said, "Selling property to a board member at a 45% loss is not best for anyone except the board member." She did not reply. She just turned and walked away. I have not spoken to her since. The committee met for the first time in April. I joined. So did Miguel. So did 8 other residents. We spent 2 months gathering input. We ran a survey. We held 3 public forums. The results were clear. 72% of residents wanted the lot to remain open space. 15% wanted a dog park. 9% wanted a community garden. 4% wanted it sold, but only at market value with proceeds going to capital reserves. The committee presented the findings at the June board meeting. The board voted unanimously to keep the lot as open space and to budget for basic landscaping and maintenance. Kimberly voted yes. It was the first time I had seen her vote against her own interest. Thomas Carver resigned from the board in May. He sent a 1-sentence email to the management company. It said, "I am resigning effective immediately for personal reasons." Susan Morris did not run for re-election. In the September election, 3 new board members were elected. One of them was a retired accountant who promised transparency and independent audits. One of them was a teacher who promised better communication. One of them was Miguel Torres. He won with 68% of the vote. Kimberly Stewart is still on the board. She is no longer head of compliance. She is a regular board member with no special title. She still carries her black binder to meetings, but she does not wave it around anymore. She does not say read the standards anymore. She votes. She listens. She has not tried to fine anyone in 6 months. I still live in Oak Hills. I still pay my dues on time. I still get annoyed by the occasional violation notice for leaving my trash can out too long. But I also know that the board is not untouchable. I know that records requests work. I know that showing up matters. I know that one email can stop a corrupt deal if you are willing to fight for it. The vacant lot is still vacant, but it is clean now. The HOA hired a landscaping crew to mow it and plant native grasses. There is a small sign that says Oak Hills Community Green Space. No dogs, no littering. It is not fancy. It is not a park. But it is ours. It belongs to the association. It belongs to all of us, and it is not being sold to a board member at a discount. Last month, I walked past the lot on my way to check the mail. I saw Kimberly standing at the edge of the grass looking at the sign. She did not see me. She just stood there for a moment, her binder tucked under her arm, her blaze orange blazer bright against the green. Then she turned and walked back to her house. I do not know what she was thinking. I do not know if she regrets what she tried to do. I do not know if she learned anything. But I know she did not win. And I know that matters. Miguel told me last week that 2 other HOAs in the area have asked him to speak at their meetings about transparency and records requests. He said, "You started something." I said, "I just did not want to get ripped off." He said, "That is how it always starts. One person who will not back down. That is all it takes." I do not know if that is true. I do not know if I am special or just stubborn. I do not know if other people can do what I did. But I know this. When Kimberly told me, "You cannot fight the HOA," she was wrong. You can fight. You can win. It is hard. It is exhausting. It costs you sleep and time and peace of mind. But it is possible. And when you win, you do not just save $60,000 or stop a corrupt land deal. You prove that homeowners are not powerless. You prove that boards are not kings. You prove that the standards work both ways. The HOA still sends me violation notices sometimes. Last month I got one for a lawn sprinkler that was running during restricted hours. It was a mistake. The sprinkler was off. I sent a photo with a timestamp. The notice was rescinded in 2 days. No argument, no fight, just a correction. That is progress. That is what accountability looks like. I still have the binder. I keep it on a shelf in my office. I have not opened it in months, but I know it is there. I know the records are there. I know the timeline is there. I know the email is there. If I ever need it again, I can pull it down and remember what happened. I can remember that I stood in a parking lot and refused to leave. I can remember that I asked questions when I was told to be quiet. I can remember that I had one email that made a lawyer stop talking. And I can remember that it worked. The lot is still there. The sign is still there. The grass is still growing. And I am still here, paying my dues, mowing my lawn, and watching the board. They know I am watching. And that makes all the difference. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.